Life throws you punches. Trauma, life, and burnout. I've lived through it all, and I've built something for the fighters that refuse to stay down. If you're ready to stop playing small and own your story, then this is where you belong. The Unstoppable Network is where the overcoming stories are getting very loud. From veterans to survivors to trailblazers, sharing their story of turning their pain into power. Welcome to the Unstoppable Network, where we turn your mess into a message. All right, good evening and welcome to another episode of the Unstoppable Network. I'm your host, Dorothy Odell. We do a lot of amazing things around here. We're veteran allies. We are hosting our 5th annual Don Gray Memorial Fun Classic coming up August 8th. So if you are in the Tilbury, Ontario area, or it doesn't matter where you are in the world, because we do have, it's truly international. We do have people coming all the way from Illinois this year. We've had Indiana in the house, Michigan in the house. So if you like to have fun, you like to golf and potentially win a $10,000 prize, if you get the hole-in-one, then we would love to have you. Just simply message me wherever you're listening in from, and we'll get you that information. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of bringing David to this show. Welcome, David. How are you?
Fine. Yourself? How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. Sorry. I try different things here. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
It worked out. We're still talking. We're good. We're good to go.
All right. So, David, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's a little bit longer than your hour show, but so what I do, I'm a speaker. I'm a TEDx speaker. I train executives how to reduce stress in their lives so they can live their best lives. I'm an author, as you can see from the book behind me, as well as other, and I help people up level their lives. And what that means is, we all have an expertise. We want to speak on stages if you're an entrepreneur, or you need to speak on stages even if you're not an entrepreneur. But you need to align the message. And that's what it all means, is I train you to help you align your message, right? Fine-tuning sometimes, and then take it to that next level. That book, to be an Amazon #1 bestseller. There's so many different ways to get aligned and speak your most authentic self. I love the part that when I was looking at the graphics coming in of the Phoenix, I have a Phoenix story, and I consider, in fact, May 11th, I had an online show where it was called the Phoenix Day. It's my Phoenix Day. Every May 11th, I celebrate the Phoenix.
Oh, wow. Can you tell us about why? What's your Phoenix story?
Yeah, so I was going through a divorce, and I was sitting in a conference room with 1,000 women. Doesn't sound so bad, but and there were top-notch speakers. There was Madeleine Albright, who used to be a Secretary of State under the Clintons, and then Geraldine Ferraro. So some high-profile women who were in there, and I'm thinking, as I'm going through this divorce, thinking about my 2 girls who were 3 and 1 at the time, and what do? I wanted to hear. I want them to be in, or have the opportunity to be in rooms like that, with that higher level thinking. And I knew, as soon as I heard the poem from Maya Angelou, the "Still I Rise," and I kept on hearing "Still I Rise, Still I Rise," kept burning a hole in my head, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, they didn't mention anything about the Phoenix, but that day is the day that I decided I was going to be a Phoenix. I was living in my ashes, and I needed to rise. And I also had some other days afterwards, but each time I've learned how to rise, and I've made myself stronger, and make sure that I don't go back into those same ashes, because the Phoenix doesn't die. Harry Potter leads us to believe that the Phoenix dies. It doesn't. It lays in its ashes until there's a spark of God. And I do believe, universe, God, whatever you call that, there's a spark within each one of us that I've learned how to work out for me, and I've helped others find the spark and what they need to do going forward.
Wow, that is powerful. It so I love that analogy of the phoenix, and it's ironically enough, about 4.5 years ago, we lost my father, and so
So,
it's I there's we all go through the times, the up and times, the down times, and in that
sure.
moment, it felt like I was rising again to another level,
Mm,
and somebody had said, it it had to happen. And I'm like, when you tell me my hero uh, had to die in order for me to get to my next level, I like that really ticked me off when I first heard it.
sure.
Ever, I'm a firm believer now, like after I've gotten to the other side, I would just like, perhaps she's right, and so I think rising ourselves up from the ashes, like you said, in any situation that we've been in. I mean,
Yeah.
we've all lost somebody, we've all lost, like you said, through your divorce.
We've had experiences. That's the thing, is learning from our experiences. No matter what, how do you get? And it might not only have to be a physical death where you're grieving a hero like your dad,
Mhm.
but having that opportunity. Is anything we want to grow, you have to lose something. I'm going to tell you. Can I share one quick story?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
So I remember when I was learning a lot of things, and Pete Sampras. My people might not know the name Pete Sampras. He used to be the number one tennis player in the world, and his coach. One of the books that I had read is his coach said, "Pete, you're number one. You can't get any better." He goes, "No, I have to get better, because if not, there's going to be people who are going to get even better than I am. What do
Mhm.
I have to lose to get better?" So we all lose something to get to that next level. Think about it. In when we were kindergarteners, right? We had to lose the ability to have a caregiver near us all the time. We got to have our own little personalities. We had to lose a little bit of that, but to also find something new. And I think that's what we do. And the loss of a parent does teach you things. I've lost both my parents,
Sorry,
but
yeah.
thank you. But it's each one has taught me something different that I might not have been here through that. And that's the thing, is sometimes something has to die, something has to change within us to then grow into the person we're supposed to become.
I have my mentor says your something along the lines of your old self has to die, like
Sure.
something, in order for you to advance to that next level. Because the what is Einstein's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
So if we don't change, then how can we advance? How can we grow? And growth is hard, but staying in the same place is hard, is I think
Yeah.
harder.
100%. You know what? What's the cost? Is sometimes definitely not in financial terms. Is those regrets? Nobody, on their deathbed is going to go, well, I could have, it's all those could have, should have. And I'll tell you a story. Um, in 2022, I had a best friend. He's still my best friend, but he's no longer with us. And he died unexpectedly. And I helped with the process, planning a funeral for a lot of reasons. But I was also cleaning out his apartment. And one of the items I have, and I usually carry it with me, is his passport. And the passport had no stamps. What do
Wow.
we do in our lives? And he had some financial means where he could have done some traveling. What do we do? What promises do we make ourselves to do that? And the richest place in the world with all the greatest ideas is a cemetery, but unfortunately none of those are fulfilled. Showing yourself how to get out of the ashes, or learning how to get out of those ashes, or get out of your own way. I know I've been guilty of putting myself in my own way until I learned the things I needed to learn. We all need to learn something and continue to grow until the day we die. You want to learn what that grace is and what that gratitude is of having that ability.
Yeah. I think for our own worst enemies in some cases. We get into our heads, and
For
our
sure.
head is our most powerful asset that we could ever have. But yet we find some of us find ourselves in that repeat cycle until you decide to get off that cycle of, staying the same, or repeating the same bad habits, until you learn, until you just
Until you're
continue on.
able to identify those. So I have a specialty in neurological pathways where I
Mhm.
learned how to do some triggers. Once you identify some triggers, how to release those and get those obstacles out of our way. And that's what I do when I train people to do that, because it's our brain summarizes our past experiences. That's why sometimes the same things happen to us over and over again. And then that's sort of the story we tell ourselves. Oh, that's always going to happen. That's not going to work. Rather than doing some introspection, as you said, about the stuff in our heads, I go, again, one of my famous comments are the monsters in our head are so much worse than the monsters we thought were under our beds. Because that we could face, right? You could face something face to face. That's a approach, but the monster in our head is so hard to overcome. And what do we do with having those abilities to overcome them, or to know that they are slay? We have the power to slay them.
Right. That is so true. And I do a lot of work with veterans, and we lose 22 veterans a day by suicide.
Yeah, actually, the number
And
is a little higher. I work with
yeah,
veterans also.
yeah,
That used to be the old number, and unfortunately, that number has become higher. You're right.
yeah. Well, it's funny because when I did a 24-hour fundraiser for our veterans, back then we did some number crunching, and it was 156 with civilians per day that die by suicide. And I think it's the fact that they get into their head that they don't see any hope, and they don't see a way out of their current situation. I've lost a family member to suicide, so I've been on that side of it. And there's no answers for the people that are left behind. But I have a co-host that sometimes comes on, and she's a trauma therapist, and she says, don't make a snap decision that could be um, a lifetime solution, but it's really not a solution.
Well,
um,
so I 6 years ago I attempted suicide. So I have like a lot of stories. But what I will tell everybody is you need to find the solution. So in those 6 years since, and I knew all the answers. So it's applying the answers, not just knowing the answers. Because I've been coaching for a while. I've coached veterans as well in overcoming some traumatic events. But I was like, I didn't want to listen. I didn't use my resources. There's always a resource that can get you out of it. And that's really the big message, is what you do with it. And from that moment, when I got myself the right resources, using my resources, I've been a TEDx speaker since that moment. I've published a couple of books, some of them Amazon #1 bestsellers. And, I've put myself in places that I never could have imagined. And all of that would have stopped that day. So again, we go back to that part. I used to have a nickname called Kid Ego. And growing up, that day, Kid Ego died. And what I mean by that is, when you are, as a parent, when you have to tell your children that you attempted suicide, that's a comment that really hits you hard. And my girls, don't even want to talk about it. But at that day, you lose your ego, and it shifts you differently. But the great thing about it is allow yourself to shift. And I've grown so much as a person now. I also always get the same question: how do you know you're not going to go back there? Well, I could tell you a bunch of different reasons. One of them is I use my resources. I have much more self awareness now than I ever did. I always thought everybody knew my perspective because, hey, I'm a good guy. Not everybody knew that. Not everybody received the way I do it, and I wasn't as self aware. So that self-awareness has taken me to that next level to be able to grow within myself, and I continue to grow, continue to push myself. And yes, I think about it, but I also know that darkness that I want to make sure that nobody else feels and that they're not alone.
Right. Wow, that is powerful. I had no idea, by the way,
Oh,
that
okay.
that was part of your story. So I'm really glad that you decided to use your resources and get out of that dark space. Can you tell me what would you is your number one best resource then when you're in the in those dark moments?
I talk to myself, so I know that we all know the answers. A lot of times, we just might be fearful of what we need to do to get there, right?
Mhm,
And that was it. Why I gave up. I just didn't want to have to do something that it was going to be unpleasant, and it was so unpleasant. I was like, and I'd been told that I was hurting people, and I never want to hurt anybody. I never at that time, but I wasn't self aware. I didn't know how some of the things I said, how they were taken, or how they were heard. Even if I said it right, it's
mhm,
how somebody else is hearing it. So doing those things. So when I do that, I one of the methods I teach, and I'll teach you right now, is called havening. It's one of the techniques that I use to heal myself, and it helps reset ourselves. It's your own personal reset button, and what you have to do is just rub your hands nice and slow in a circular motion, and in a just a little slower, and you do that for 10 seconds. It starts to create delta waves, which are relaxation waves. It's the same brain waves we use when we fall asleep. So
mhm,
it's just putting us into that calm frame set mindset, and really then taking us to that next level is okay. Because when you're calm, you're not thinking of doing damage. You're thinking of solutions. It's feeling the weight of the world. Often, all of us still, and I still get those weight of the world type of conversations. But I know
mhm.
how to manage it now. I know what I need to do and to reset myself, so that way I could do that. I enjoy writing. Again, I wasn't an author beforehand. I might have done some writing, but I never really thought of publishing. I thought that was out of the realm of what I could do. It was a limiting belief that I had, and since now I have about 8 or 9 books. Then there's a couple of compilation books, a comic book. So it's what we do with the energy that we think. It's so much easier to not do something positive. It takes more energy to be more positive. But I'll tell you, the negative stuff never gets you to something that's going to be worthwhile. It's always going to be the positive, that extra energy, using your energy in the right way.
Right. Absolutely. So I have to ask, what is your book that's behind you about when your heart says it's your time to soar?
Yeah, so that was a book. Again, it was out of notes. I think we all have a pattern in life. We were born. We have a middle messy part, and then we have an opportunity to soar. But we know what you could be in any one of those stages, that beginning stage, and you don't belong there, right? As a kid, sometimes we're like, I don't belong with these people. I know that they're my family, but I don't belong here. And not everybody has the dad that it sounds like you had, the hero. But even
Mhm,
then, I'm sure he gave you room to grow and to, know, find your little runway and to soar. And
mhm,
that's really what we're talking about, is that soaring. Who are you? What is your purpose? So that was what the book is. It's a bunch of stories and poems that I wrote over the years of just motivational ways of stories that came on in my life. You want to get to know me really well? That's a great way. There's people who came in my life who had huge impacts and opportunities on those impacts. There's a story about my first girlfriend, that first love we have, but she got killed by a drunk driver, and and going through that, and I didn't know that I had survivor guilt, which I found 35 years later. We were not teenagers, we were college and all that, and she was hit walking on the sidewalk. She didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong, and you just don't know what you hold on to. Those obstacles that I talk about, you don't know what you're holding on to until you can release some of those things.
Mhm.
There's I talk about, a hug. Sometimes you get a hug that you didn't know you needed, but once you need it, you feel it.
Yeah.
And I had that, uh, you know, from an ex father-in-law. He came right after my dad died, and I was holding everything together, and I felt okay. But see, I get emotional now, because he just recently passed.
Oh,
Yeah, so Lou passed, but he shook my hand. I said thanks for coming, and then he pulled me in unexpectedly, and it made me break a little bit. So I wrote a poem about the hug. And then I have stories in there about my best friend who also passed away unexpectedly. But the story is not about his death; it's about his life. It's about pushing ourselves to the next level. When I got divorced, Kevin, my friend Kevin, took me. We went to Yosemite, and he wasn't a physical guy. He was like, yeah, I'll go with you. You go take your pictures, your photography, do what you need to do. And we found one trail that was only 2.5 miles. Or we're like, okay, you could do that. Well, the problem was we didn't realize at that time that the trail was 1,000 feet in altitude. So it was a little bit of a challenge. It was Nevada Falls in Yosemite for anybody who might be there. And we get up there and we're struggling, and I'm in better shape than he was. And I said, Kev, you don't have to tell anybody. You can stay here. I'll go to the top, take some pictures. I'll say you went up there. And as much of a struggle, it took us a lot longer because of how he struggled and everything but he got to the top. Perseverance is knowing what's the top that we could do. When do we push when nobody else thinks that we can do it? And that's the power of perseverance and that. And I know afterwards, anytime I mentioned Nevada Falls, he knew he did something that was more incredible that I didn't think he could do, honestly. Even though I thought he could do a whole lot, it was a struggle. It was a tight, trailways. It wasn't a nice, easy path, but his perseverance and desire really pushed us to that next level. And I think that's what we all do. Is what are the things that you might have done, Dorothy, in your life that nobody thought you could do? It doesn't matter what, but then you pushed yourself because you did that. And that's being an author. Sometimes that's having a TEDx talk. And sometimes it's just getting up in the morning and having a cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be anything large.
yeah,
Put yourself that perseverance to know what it feels like at that moment.
yeah. Amen. It's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking of a story of I had a mother-in-law at one point that said, "Oh, there's no." I said, I forget what birthday it was. I was going to drive my bike from where we lived to the next town, back up and around. So technically, it's like a 20-minute car ride. Uh, and she didn't think that I could absolutely do it. So I'm like, well, watch me. So I got up that morning. I drove out to Comber. For those of you that know where that is in Canada, and from Tilbury to Comber and back. It took me a couple hours, and it's funny because as I was doing it, my grandmother called me. So I stopped to talk to my grandmother, and so I did it. I obviously took the break to speak with her, but I ended up. I don't know how long it took me to do it. I can't remember, but I'm like, don't tell me I can't do something because I will show you that I can do it.
That yeah, that and now, I mean, look, I saw your face, how that memory, is still ingrained in you. It's those touchstone moments in our lives that really show us who we are to ourselves. It's so important to know for ourselves what we need to do to go forward and how we want to go forward. What changes or whatever might have happened in in our past. What do we want to do to go forward?
Amen. And I think it's easy to get locked into what's not going right. But
Oh,
I'm. It's not by chance that we're having this conversation today because I was really struggling this morning. I will admit, I just there's a lot of stuff that had been going on. Um, and I just felt like nothing was going right. Right.
Mhm.
Looking at the different pathways that, that I'm on. Of course, I don't think anybody's where they want to be in life completely. But and it takes sometimes it feels like it takes forever to get
Sure.
to that place, right? It's like like you said, you're climbing up, feels like Mount Everest, and then you get to the top and then you take a picture. And life is all about climbing those mountains, taking the picture, and then going on to the next mountain, right? Um, and not getting caught up in how long it takes, or the mistakes that you've made. And we all make mistakes, and unfortunately sometimes uh mistakes are welcome, and sometimes mistakes are like, no, like I think of like work. Mistakes sometimes could be detrimental, depending on, like, if you're a doctor, you make a mistake, that's someone's life, right? And so, but I think if we all learn from that, um then I always thought that a mistake was like a learning curve, right? You learn from your mistake. But it appears in certain areas of my life, it's like one after the other, and I'm like, oh my god, you know.
Well, well, it's what we've learned from some of our biggest mistakes, or some
Right.
of our biggest pains, and that's why, not to be toxic positivity, but there are learning lessons that can
Mhm.
come out of every event. That doesn't mean every event is going to be good, or if things are not going well, to just push it till you make it. Fake it till you make it. No, that's not good advice. Yes, you might need a little false hope, right? False courage.
Mhm.
That's okay. False courage is just like, all right, I just got to do it. You can say it all you want in our head, but pushing yourself through things really takes us to that next level, and know what's false and what are the things we have to learn, right? Thomas Edison says, he took 1,000 different ways to find out what needed to make the electric light bulb. That doesn't mean all those places didn't work. It learned what didn't work, and that's hard for us as humans. We want it all to go right at the first time. I mean, everything looks right when you watch those videos, right? The turning the cup upside down. Man, he did that. Oh, must have done that on the first try. I could never do that. Doesn't tell you how many times it took them to do it.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I mean, I used to compare myself to a lot of different people,
Mhm.
and then I realized how much that was just ruining my mental health.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, so as long as I'm 1% better than what I was yesterday, the 1% rule. I forget. There's a book. Is it The Atomic
Kaizen.
Habit?
Well, yeah. Well, there's
Yeah,
a Japanese philosophy, Kaizen. You change 1%, small increments built over time,
yeah,
really take it to that next level.
yeah. So, I mean, and especially if anybody's listening right now and they're in that similar situation, just take a deep breath. And do David's thing where
Yeah, just
small,
rub your hands,
rub your
nice and
hands.
easy. Yeah, it's one of the, and most people do that anyway. I mean, that's why there's a couple of ways to generate these delta waves. Sometimes rubbing your forehead, not sometimes it will, but and we things that we already do that we don't realize. You don't realize when you rub your forehead, why does that feel good? Well, it feels good because it creates delta waves in the same way as the rubbing your hands. But if you're in public, you rub people are going to worry about you. Oh, what's going on, Dorothy? But if you're rubbing your hands, a lot of times people don't see that.
Mhm.
And there's other methods to do it. There's breathing techniques. There's a million different ways, but I love talking about havening because when you go deeper with havening, you can then avoid those obstacles. You're able to identify it and helps optimize your brain and rewire some of those summarizations that our brain comes up with, our amygdala comes up with.
Right. So I have to ask, what made you decide to get into speaking, being an author, things like that?
Well, some things just get thrown on you. But as a leader, you reach out to do that. And I always wanted. I remember being in kindergarten and like early elementary. I would love to be an author, and I learned how to be I thought it was too far away to happen. That'll never happen. I did have an uncle who was an author and a world-renowned author and things like that, but I was like, that's not for me, right? Part of my limiting beliefs. And then as life goes, my bachelor's degree is in behavioral sciences, and then I had a career in legal, not as a lawyer, uh, but those things started coming to me and opportunities. And in fact, when I got the job that I had for 22 years in corporate America, they asked me, "Could you go out and teach people about counterfeits?" I'm like, "Sure, I get the job." And then I had to speak at times. So a lot of it is just, all right. If they think I could do it, I could do it. I didn't know. I had obstacles, and then I started doing it and being able to communicate. Then I had started writing books, and nobody knew it was in my hidey spaces. And then I
Mhm.
started showing people, and then I just started getting training. You have to get better at it. Anything you want to be really good at, you have to be prepared to be really bad at it first. So I
Mhm.
was definitely the nervous guy. I had, childhood trauma around the speaking. In sixth grade, I had to do a report, and you know, in that day, we didn't have computerized printouts. We had to handwrite everything. So instead of the word statistics, I wrote statics. So I kept on reading the paper. My teacher at that time embarrassed me in the class, and he ripped it out of my hands. And he goes, "That's why you're saying it. You can't say statistics." See, I still, get it, but now I can.
Mhm.
But it really goes back to what we believe. And from then, I was like, I never want to get up in class anymore. And then there was opportunities that I did get up, and people were hearing my thoughts and knowing it. I continue to learn things and grow through the things I did. That's how I wrote my first fiction book. I was going through some emotions. How do you get through it? I don't know how you get through it. You write stories. Okay, so I wrote some stories, and then you get people to read those stories. You put it out there. You put it on Amazon. My book's not going to be good enough, and that first fiction book, Redemption, became an Amazon bestseller. Which then I come back from my vacation. I didn't even push it out there as heavily. And one of my friends was like, "My daughter read it, and she needs to talk to you." And I was like, "It was all appropriate, I promise." But what happened is then Redemption, the story resonated with that little girl so much that she was like, "Well, what's going to happen now? You're the author, so you have to know the answers."
Mhm.
I didn't know the answers at that moment, but it's one of those things that I'm like, "Well, what do you think should happen? Well, what's this? What's that?" And I started taking notes, and I just published the second book in the series, and there's a
Well,
third book in the series. I never even thought to do it. So a lot of that is putting myself in the right position, open to feedback, and
mhm.
then also, raising your hand. As a leader, we raise our hand, and what does that mean? It's not because I'm in the room. I want to be a leader that when I am out of the room, people still are affected. And those are the stories that we have. And that's why I love when I speak and I have people who still talk to me about my R and heart speech. And they're like, I have an R word. My R word has changed, Dave. I'm like, that's great. Because it resonates with people. I like connecting to people, and I like uplifting them. I've been in lots of positions in my life where people have taken advantage of me, and I don't want to be that person. I want to be what we call on my podcast, Uncle Dave. That person that you could tell anything. You could tell the story of your life to, no matter what you did, as bad as you were, and we'll figure out a solution. And that's why I become a speaker. I want to show people that they could do it also. It's not because I'm wonderful. I'm not wonderful. I still make errors. I don't mind telling people about my errors. I'm sloppy at times, but through my sloppiness, I also am my most authentic self. I'll tell you about all these stories, not because I'm wonderful. It's because I know what it feels like to be in those positions of fearing to get up on stage. Most people don't want to do a eulogy. They would rather be in the box than do the eulogy. Man, I love talking. Just give me at this point, I have stories, and I acknowledge the good stories and the less good stories. A
Mhm.
lot of my Phoenix moments were some of the darkest moments of my life. My
Mm.
suicide attempt wasn't something that I'm proud of, but it was something I lived through, and I've been successful every day since. And because of that, somebody else needs to hear that story.
Yeah. Amen. Like you said, here you are, in your dark moment, but you're helping somebody through theirs by sharing yours. And that's, part of the reason why I started this show almost 5 years ago, because I wanted to give people hope, and I wanted to say, hey, listen, if I can do this, so can you. I'm no different than anybody else. I just decided that I wasn't going to give up. And so, what your podcast, is it Peace, Love, and Bring It Back?
Yeah, you might have noticed I have a little bit of a New York accent,
I love
um,
it.
but I love talking about peace and love. Right, that's the foundation of most of our lives, or we strive for that, to have that peace. What that means to you is, the and then love. We understand love, and I'm talking about unconditional love, not hey Dorothy, you're not wearing teal. If you put a teal shirt on, I'll love you, and like no, it's accepting each other the way we are. That's what unconditional love is. I don't know if you have children, but that love. You don't have to think about it. I know without meeting anybody in your family, they don't have a question. You love the people you love. It's not like, well, I think Dorothy loves me. Dave might love me. No.
Mm.
I say it regularly. So love is that, and then the bat. It's a little play on words because I like acronyms. So yeah, it's not about violence, right? But it sounds like that. It's a little funny. It's about being awesome today, bringing authenticity to you, bring those thoughts to us. Those are the things that I love with the bat. And I do walk around with a bat. I do walk around in my teal suits, and I do, the glasses match. I understand it. I don't always wear these glasses, but it's all an idea of what we want to do. And the bat is also when things are in balance, we can do the best we can. We hit our sweet spots. I don't know. Have you ever played softball or baseball?
Been a long time, but yeah.
Been a long time, but when you hit that ball the right way, how good that felt.
The
That doesn't mean,
ting.
yeah, it doesn't mean that you hit a home run, but you did the best that you can do. That's what your sweet spot is. That's the sweet spot is I did the best I could do. I couldn't have done anything better. I hit the ball right on the nose. The results sometimes work out a little bit better than others, but man, I did the best because I had the right balance. I was able to swing with the right weight of the bat, and that's what the beauty of the peace, love, and bring a bat. And I bring on people who have stories that are like mine, who and a lot of times often worse. But there's no line that we have right. Once you cross that line of being bad, it doesn't matter that your story got worse and it's you got bad.
Mm.
We all have to remember that. And then there's times that we'll just talk about leadership because when we all take that leadership crown, that leadership cap we put on our heads, and what do we want to do? And that's one of the things I hold sacred to me is I try to be a leader not only when I'm in the room, but when I'm out of the room. And if I can motivate anybody to be a better person for themselves and defined by them, not by society, I've done my job.
Amen. Amen. Yes, I love that. I love the bat analogy. I could just, picture around swinging a bat and just like, or having it there and, finding your balance.
Well, I
Sometimes,
teach people that. So I do corporate events and I have a batting net and I bring a bat. And some people, like, oh, I could do this, but it's like the board breaking. I want you to think about something, I don't know if you've ever done board breaking at an event. So board breaking, for those who don't know, it's like a karate, punch to break a board. And I've done that. And a lot of times they want to do is you're breaking through something. And and that's good. So you write on the board, I'm breaking through this, or I can overcome X. Great. For the sweet spot, I want you to remember something that you want to do or that you have done already as a touchstone. So I teach people how to swing, and some people don't know how to swing a baseball bat properly, and we're not worried about the necessarily results. We're worried about the feeling that we have, that successful feeling. And that's what it does. I love showing this and bringing my baseball bat around and teaching people. I was at an event once, and a woman had to get up to speak, and she says, "I can't do this." I said, "All right, you're with Uncle Dave. You're going to be able to do this." And I showed her some techniques, and then I said, "Let me give you my bat. Come like this. Think about your speech." Taught her how to swing a little bit. She never swung a baseball bat, and I showed her what that sweet spot meant for her. And through that, she was able to get on stage, and she gave her talk. And with the ums and ahs and all those things, being that imperfect but perfect, authentic moment for her. And she's gotten better at speeches and definitely get on different stages because of that first time and learning what that meant for her, that sweet spot meant for her.
Right. I love that. That's ironic because November of last year was my first time I spoke on stage at the University of Toronto.
Nice.
So I did two different talks, and I was I was just like, oh my gosh. I thought, like, the first one I did, I was like, oh, that felt great. And then I had everybody come up to me after and say, like, oh my God, I learned so much. And I was just like, really? I was just like, huh?
How good did that feel? Right?
That was just like the most euphoric moment of my life next to my wedding day. It was just like, really? Like I
I
couldn't
could see
believe
in
it.
your face. I love seeing those feelings because that's a touchstone in your career as a speaker and in your life. Again, those moments that all I have to do is say. So again, like with Kevin, all I had to do is say, Yosemite or Nevada Falls. His whole body, the chemistry in his body shifted. So I know now to talk about the University of Toronto speech for you, and look at that face. Look how big you're smiling, and how proud you were to overcome something, and then the feedback. Who doesn't want feedback? Who doesn't want positive feedback?
Exactly. Which it actually reminds me, I can actually now share that speech. I had to wait until the organizer shared it on his TV first, and then I can share it. So now I'll be able to share that.
Excellent. How good does that feel that you get to share one of the best moments of your life?
That feels pretty incredible. Feels
Awesome.
pretty incredible.
Congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. It's funny because I actually approached somebody to do a TED Talk, and because there's an organization here right in Detroit, which is like 5 minutes from where I live. So I'm like, well, what's the worst that could happen? He could say no. So I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and he was booked solid. So, but I mean, that's just one not right now.
Right.
Uh,
It's a not. It's a yet. So I
right,
use that as yet. So I haven't been king of the world yet. It's a
right,
sort of a promise we make ourselves. Did I
right.
hear you? Did I hear that you live outside of Detroit?
I do. I live outside of Detroit.
Okay, well, Detroit. I'm going to be in Detroit in September to do some speaking. There's a conference, so obviously
Perfect.
we'll figure something out
We'll
between
figure
now
it
and
out.
September. But yeah, no, that's why. When I heard that, I when I was like Detroit, I'm going to be in Detroit,
Well, I live in Windsor, Ontario, so it's like literally
right over the border. Yeah,
right over the border.
yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah.
yeah.
Depending depending on what time in September, because that's when I take my vacation too. So,
Gotcha.
um,
Yeah.
if it's at the beginning, I'll be away. But if it's at close to the middle or end, I'll be. Oh, we'll figure it out. We'll
All
talk
right. Yeah.
after the
No.
show.
For sure. Yeah. We're gonna have another Canadian. We're gonna have my friend Mike Duffy there also, who teaches
Oh,
people about YouTube, the successes of YouTube, and how to expand your visibility through YouTube.
oh, cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
We have lots. I have lots of good things going on, and just because I try not to say no, I try to see what it is. I am particular in now having my boundaries. Another one of the bat moments. We know our boundaries really well, and by having that is one of the ways we learn ourselves.
100%. Boundaries are important. Trust me. I spent most of my
100%.
life without them
Yep.
until I hit a wall several times, and knew that something needed to change. So, Um, I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this show once upon a time were huge people pleasers.
Sure.
Um, and when that's how you grew up and that's what you knew, that's what you did until you knew something better.
100%. I mean, that's why we keep learning and growing, because you until you know something, then it becomes a choice.
Yes.
If you don't know, you can use that excuse once, maybe twice, but not really. Hey, I didn't know. But after that, then it becomes a choice. I mean, that's really what happened. After my suicide attempt, is that I didn't know how some people were taking some of my words. I knew how I was meaning them, but that wasn't how they were receiving them. And until I had a little bit more self awareness, truthfully, then I was like, "Oh, okay." And now I check in a lot more with people to make sure that they understand what I'm saying, and making sure we're on the same wavelength.
Right. Right. Self-awareness is key. It's massive.
100%.
And how we say something, the tonality and things like that is important, but also we have to remember that how somebody takes what we say is not always 100% on us, because they could be triggered from something that doesn't even mean anything to do with
100%.
us.
Uh,
Um, that was one of my biggest learning curves of my life.
sure.
Um, because I mean, anybody can easily be triggered, and then you think it's your fault.
And a lot of times it doesn't have to do with us. That's
No,
where we all think it's all about us. Dorothy doesn't like me. Dave doesn't like me, and it's like Dave's just focused on something else. Like it's not that I don't like any. Those are the things. Like a lot of times I'm walking down the street and some friends are like, "Man, who pissed you off today?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm actually in a good mood." And they're like, "But your face." I go, "I don't know. I'm just thinking. I'm not that smart. It takes me longer to think." But it's their perception of what they think is going on in my life, and that's where we need to just have conversations like this. Having those conversations is now. If you see me thinking, if we meet in Detroit, you won't be like, "Oh, I can't bother him now. He's thinking." You'll know. I mean, I'm also one of those guys. You'll know if I'm upset, but the idea of thinking versus upset, that's a different thing.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for your time. Where's the best place that people could reach you at?
Really, anyway, if you type in David Chametzky and you spell it right, you're gonna find me, man. You're gonna find me all over. Between the podcast, but I do have a website that I know we have rolling down below the website, so
Yeah.
it's davidchametzky.com. Get on my calendar. Anybody, anything I've said about, if you want to write a book, come talk to me. You want to up level your speaking, come talk to me. You want to learn a little bit about podcasting and visibility, come talk to me. I love talking. And then, of course, if there's any mental things you feel alone, come talk to me. I'll get you to people. I'm not a therapist, so that's not something I'm going to try to do. I will make sure you're not alone, and we need to remember that we're all not alone. There's always somebody who will listen, either a stranger like me, uh, or somebody in your own little circle.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, it's ironic because I found my tribe about 5 years ago, and that tribe has helped me through some of the worst moments of my life.
Mm,
So having those people around you that you could talk to and things like that, or is extremely important.
priceless.
Um, it 100% priceless. And I love every single one of my tribe. So thank big heart to all of them out there. They know who they are. But again, thank you so much, Dave, for coming on, sharing your wisdom. Don't forget to go check out his books. I'm sure they all on Amazon?
Most of them are on Amazon, and we're in the process of getting the last few um, out there. I just released. When I tell you I'm an author, I want to make sure everybody knows I'm an author. So I just released 4 books that I'd been writing for years, and I just didn't edit it. And I was like, okay, let's go get them out. And that's how the second part of Redemption came out.
Oh, wow. Love it. So go check them out. And if you are available August 8th, we've been more than happy to have you at the 5th Annual Don Gray Memorial Fun Classic. All proceeds will go to the Chatham Kent Health Alliance Foundation, the Patient Care Assist program, so that the money goes right back to the community, to those people that need help with their medical expenses that are not covered by OHIP. Yes, here in Canada we have OHIP.
Yep.
You
Let's
know,
talk about that. I love doing some, which we didn't get into, is philanthropy side. So let's see how I can support you.
Oh, perfect. That would be awesome. Yes, we're looking for golfer sponsors, whenever. So if that is your jam, connect with me. We'd be happy
Sure.
to talk about it. With that, though, folks, be unstoppable in all that you do. Remember, same time, same channel next week.